Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because, honestly, we're looking at something that is just fundamentally shifting how we work. Today, we're doing a full-on tournament-style breakdown of the top AI coding tools on the market right now. We're going to look at the data, the user experiences, and the hard facts to see how these cutting-edge platforms actually stack up against each other when you push them to their absolute limits in real-world environments.
So let's just dive right into it by asking the big question on every single developer's mind right now. Can this new wave of tools actually beat our current heavyweight champion in a real workflow? Tech writer Parth Shah recently put this exact question to the test. He took three major challengers, Google Antigravity, Codex, and Cursor 3.0, and literally forced them to replace Claude Code in actual everyday projects. We're going to use his findings, plus some really fascinating community feedback, to break down exactly where these tools succeed and, well, where they just fall flat on their faces. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll set our benchmark, look at Codex, check out Cursor 3.0, dive into Antigravity 2.0, and finally, wrap things up with that classic developer debate, polish versus reliability. Let's get to it. Part 1, the benchmark. Because, to really understand the challengers, we first have to understand the reigning champ. We're starting with the tool that sets a remarkably high bar for reasoning through those messy, complicated projects. And that brings us to this quote, which really hits the nail on the head. Fast when it needs to be, thoughtful when the project gets messy. Claude Code is the benchmark for a reason. As Parth Shah noted in his testing, Claude isn't just spitting out code, it actually understands the intent behind your project. Instead of just blindly following every prompt you throw its way, it actually thrives in terminal chaos. The big takeaway here is that Claude Code becomes exponentially more useful once you stop treating it like a basic code generator and actually start using it to deeply understand your project's architecture. That is the incredibly high bar these challengers have to clear. All right, part 2, introducing our first challenger, Codex. Let's see how it tries to take the crown by aiming for a highly dedicated agent-first workflow. Now, where Codex kind of stumbles is on the granular UI and UX details. On the plus side, in terms of user interface and overall experience, it actually feels the closest to Claude Code. You get that dedicated agent-first feel, so you aren't constantly alt-tabbing between a chat window and your editor. But it drops the ball on the little things. When you're building websites or feature-heavy apps, it gets the broad structure right, sure. But things like spacing, visual hierarchy, button states, responsive behavior, and empty states, yeah, those are going to need a lot of manual correction. It just lacks that final layer of polish. But, and this is a big but, the crucial point here is that while the visual output definitely needs some hand-holding, Codex is absolutely not just a basic chatbot bolted onto an editor. It supports some incredibly serious foundational coding workflows. We're talking parallel tasks, native Git integration, and work trees. It's a really robust tool under the hood. And honestly, with newer models rolling out, that execution and polish gap might close pretty soon. But for right now, you're going to have to clean up its aesthetic messes. Moving on to part 3, Cursor 3.0. And let me tell you, this one completely changes the game. If you previously dismissed Cursor as, just another VS Code fork with some AI sprinkled on top, this latest version puts the Agentic window front and center. Cursor's biggest strength is that it acts as this beautifully balanced bridge between manual coding and agentic development. It doesn't force you to surrender your entire workflow to an AI agent, but it also doesn't trap you in that old editor-first mindset. It's a flow. You let the agent take the first pass, like, say, adding a mobile-friendly sidebar. Then you review the diff, jump into the terminal to manually tweak the spacing or the copy, and just effortlessly hand it right back to the AI. You're always in the loop, which feels great. It's also super smooth at handling different scales of work. You can keep those smaller, rapid manual edits totally local while pushing the longer, computationally heavy AI tasks up to the cloud. Now, the trade-off here, at least according to the testing, is that Cursor's Composer 2.5 AI still can't quite reason through messy prompts the way Claude Code can. It's fast, it's capable, for sure, but when the logic gets really tangled up, it just doesn't have the same raw reasoning power as our benchmark. All right, part 4. Now we arrive at the surprise heavy hitter of the group, Google Antigravity 2.0. The first version was widely considered, let's be honest, a bit too unstable for serious work, but Google clearly went back to the drawing board here. They actually fixed a lot of that prior instability by making some fundamental architectural changes. Namely, they split the experience into two distinct, highly functional parts. On one side, you have this dedicated agentic coding app, which is built specifically for running tasks, managing agents, and just letting Gemini chew on massive jobs. Then on the other side, you've got the traditional IDE, a familiar editor with Gemini sitting right there faithfully by your side. This split workspace approach gives developers exactly the right environment for whatever specific task is at hand. And when it comes to the details, Antigravity 2.0 absolutely crushes it. When Partha tested this by building a project dashboard, it nailed the precise card spacing, the button placement, and icon consistency basically right out of the gate. But the real standout is that last point, multi-step context retention. You can literally ask it to create a feature, refine the UI, fix the responsiveness, and then clean up the code, and it does it all without losing the plot or forgetting the context of the project. Aesthetically, it's pretty flawless. Which brings us to part 5, polish versus reliability. This is a massive philosophical trade-off that the developer community is hotly debating right now. Aesthetics or underlying logic? Look at this incredible analogy from a developer in the community. Gemini builds VWs, and Claude Code builds Toyota Land Cruisers. This just perfectly captures the ultimate choice between our reigning champ and our top challenger. It is such a brilliant way to visualize the difference in how these AI models approach software architecture, and it gets right to the heart of what you, as a developer, actually value when you sit down to work. So here is that crucial choice broken down. On side A, we've got the Claude Code, Toyota Land Cruiser approach. The AI gives you rough, unpolished initial designs, but the underlying engine, the core logic, is absolutely bulletproof. You've got to manually pretty it up, but once it's built, it's going to run forever. Then, on side B, we have the Antigravity VW approach. You get incredibly high UI and UX polish right out of the factory. It looks stunning, but the underlying code requires a lot more maintenance and frequently suffers from, well, metaphorical recalls, issues with the engine or the transmission, so to speak. Actually, as another community member vividly warned, you really can't let that beautiful front-end polish fool you into blindly trusting the underlying architecture. While Antigravity 2.0 might be the only alternative the original reviewer felt was actually worth paying for, the community is quick to point out a major catch. An AI that perfectly aligns your CSS might simultaneously be writing a back-end logic engine out of Legos. With half the pieces missing, it's a fascinating divide. So before we wrap up, let's look at exactly where each tool shines and where you're going to have to compromise today. Claude remains the logic king, hands down, but struggles with design. Codex integrates beautifully with serious agent-first workflows like Git and work trees, but totally misses the mark on UI details. Cursor 3.0 acts as this awesome balanced bridge for developer control, but has slightly weaker reasoning. And Antigravity 2.0 delivers just unmatched UI and UX polish through its split workspace, but you really have to double-check its logic reliability. And that brings us to the end of our breakdown today. I want to leave you with this final, provocative question. When you boot up your IDE tomorrow, what is your coding philosophy? Are you willing to accept an ugly Land Cruiser that you have to paint yourself, just as long as it never breaks down? Or are you chasing that beautiful, instant interface, even if it means you might be driving on a Lego engine? It's a huge trade-off we all have to make in this new era of AI development. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep building, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.